had a wonderful, wonderful life together, and I'm so blessed. Okay, goodbye.
As is the tradition in this community, and I think many of Tony's communities, the service, the more formal part, was just the prelude. The prelude for this occasion where people can share their memories of Tony. And we'd like to start with Timothy, Tony's son.
That was beautiful.
All right, everybody hear me? Yep. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, so, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Tim. I'm the eldest son of Tony's 4 kids. I'm going to just call him Pop. I'm going to call him Pop, right? Okay. You know, what happened when we were inside that church there is all of a sudden I realized I don't need to be nervous anymore because Sue and Nick and Pastor Joel said my speech. So all I had to do was come up here and just say ditto and take a seat. But as it turns out, I'm not going to do that. So what that left me, okay, so. Sure, I got you. Right here? Yeah. Okay. The first thing is the follow the boat story. Second thing is a great listener and talks a lot. And Pastor Joel, thanks a lot for the whole community thing. So, there I am. I'm left with not much, right? But actually, you know what? I'm left with a lot. I'm left with a lot that my dad gave me. And so all I'm going to do, you guys, I'm just going to tell a couple of stories about the last time that I saw Pop and what he meant to me, okay? So, it was real lucky for me, actually. It was the day after my son Joshua's graduation, and they were down in San Clemente, and they had come to Joshua's graduation. And they said, hey, why don't we go for some lunch or something? This is the next day. And, you know, so we could just catch up and just hang out, you know, without everybody else around. And so I said, sure. And so I headed over to Oceanside Harbor and met them there. And we had a great lunch. And coming outside, when we were doing our hugs goodbye, you know, and saying goodbye, we just gave ourselves sort of that regular hug. And Susan had already hopped in the car on the passenger side. And we're in the front of our 2 cars. And when we let go of hugging one another, and I don't know what it was because this has never happened with us, is we sort of looked at each other and then each of us at the same time like grabbed onto one another and gave each other like a huge bear hug. And that just wasn't really very common, you know, it was just the one hug, goodbye, I love you and whatnot. So we did that and then we parted ways, right? And then he goes over to the driver's side of his car and I walk around the driver's side of my car. And then another thing, right? So then he turns from his door and is facing me now, and he says, I love you, Tim. And I'm like, I love you too, Pop. And then we got in the cars and we drove off, right? But see, you never know, right, when the last time you're going to see somebody is in person. You don't know which memories to imprint, which memories to sort of put in the back and mix with all the other times that you saw your dad. And for whatever reason, I am fortunate enough to remember the very last time that I saw my dad physically and the words that we spoke. So that to me, it means a ton. The last time I talked to him though, this is maybe a little bit harder to get through. Okay, the last time I talked to Pop was July 4th of this same year, right? So for all of you, or for some of you, or for most of you know, for many, many years, we went to Lake Shasta every year on vacation. Doing camping, water skiing, houseboating, patio boating, all, you know, everything you could think of, right? And we weren't at Shasta this last year, and I wasn't with my dad this last 4th of July. And I just pulled into my driveway at home, and I had just this profound sense of gratitude just wash over me. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, why do I feel this? Because I've gotten really emotional, and I'm sitting there by myself, right? And then maybe that was it. Maybe it was sitting in my driveway by myself on the 4th of July and realizing, wait a second, we're usually at Shasta all this time, right? We got years and years of memories of going there and being gone for like 10 days from like the 1st to the 9th or the 1st to the 8th. So here we are. And so you know what I did? I did something really uncommon. Again, I picked up the phone and I called him. frankly, you guys, I would have never done that. I usually would probably just keep those feelings to myself, right? But I called my dad, called Pop, and I was crying when he answered the phone, right? And he's like, Tim, my God, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I'm like, you know what? Nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong at all. I wanted to call you to tell you thank you. I wanted to call you to tell you how grateful I was that you worked as hard as you did, that you sacrificed what you did, that you had the patience to bring 4, sometimes 5 people to Shasta every year for years and years in a row, and the patience to manage that situation, right? And so I was expressing that to him, and he's like, I said, you know what, those are the best times of my life. And so all of his hard work, all of his sacrifice created the best memories of my life. And I told him that, which, again, wouldn't be common for me. Susan gets back in the car. She was inside the store somewhere. We caught her up on what we were saying. And I got to say goodbye. I said goodbye to Susan, and I said, I love you, Pop. And as it turns out, you know, he was talking to a whole bunch of other people about how proud or how happy he was that I made that phone call to him, that he couldn't believe that I picked up the phone and just called to thank him for all those years. Because, you know, those were really, like I said, the best times of my life. So, one thing? No, this is it. Okay. I never knew just how much of a hero my dad was to me. And looking back on his and I's relationship, there was something that I was showing him when I was real young about what kind of hero he was to me. There was a picture taken of my dad at this pancake flipping contest in 1984 that all you guys have seen, right? Well, what none of you, maybe about 5 or 6 people here know, is that that poster sat on my wall over my bed for my entire teenage years until I moved out of the house. A lot of people have cars, women, whatever on their wall. The picture, the poster that size on my wall was of my dad. And I think that that's pretty unique. I think that's pretty special. And I was happy to have it. And I think that's it. I just want to say, you know, I realized after he passed away just what he meant to me. And I think that a lot of us end up feeling like that. But I just wanted to tell everybody how much I love him and that I'm going to miss him.
Tony's sister Colette was not able to be here today, but she sent some notes to Liz. We'll now relay them.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here to honor my dad. So my Aunt Colette is one of the few people that I've known my entire life. Few people left in this world. And she sent me this text a few weeks ago. And when I asked her, what would you like me to say on your behalf? She said, just read the text that I sent you. So that this is actually what she sent me. It was a text that she actually had sent to my dad after he went to the other side. She called him bro. She said, dearest bro, I'm thinking about you now, Wednesday, October 2nd, and the special talk we had in July when Rosie and I came for a week to watch the 2024 Olympics together. It was such a treat to share. And then one day in private, we chatted about some personal feelings we had, especially about being the last 2 Freitases and next on the list for departure, and how we should have a memorial celebration while we were still alive and well. We thought everybody would buy in, and then some time passes and wham, suddenly you take off like Zoom, gone. Well, we had talked about it, and wouldn't it be great if we could get gone quick? And well, being the totally responsible person that you are, you did it. I'm glad, bro, you lived up to your end. And when Mama said, take care of your sister, she didn't specify in flesh or spirit, so don't forget me, okay? You'll always be with me no matter what, and as I've told you many times along the way, you will always be the most awesomest, greatest human being I know, from our first beginnings as little people in Hawaii. Thank you for sharing your beautiful life with us and for us. And my sadness turns to joy when I remember all the special times we shared along life's road. Your loving sister sends all the love you need to continue on with your new story, Colette. Thank you.
Kyle? Hello, everyone. I got in at 4 o'clock last night, so I didn't get to print out my speech. But yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of things about my grandpa. So, to appropriately share my feelings and love for Papa, it's important to share some context about myself. My full name is Kyle Anthoncourt. I'm Suzanne's middle son, and a lucky grandchild that got to be named after him. Coincidentally, out of all my brothers, I'm also the one that has like the most similarities to Tony. I was blessed with his witty humor, his Portuguese skin tone, thick head of hair, his amazing style, and his gentle disposition. My mom always reminds me how much I remind her of him. Right now, I am a sophomore at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, which is on Oahu. And for those of you who don't know, Tony grew up in Pearl Harbor, which is about 20 minutes from my home in Ainahaina. Papa would always ask me, Kyle, how's the island life? Staying at a Pelikia, which is Hawaiian for trouble. And I always shared how amazing Hawaii is and how I am trying to focus on my studies and surfing instead of like the many other distractions that colleges have to offer. I think by me choosing Hawaii for school, I will won me some points in Papa's heart and making him happy to know that I'm bringing back the family to Hawaii. It wasn't until the later years in my life that I got to appreciate and understand the man that Tony was. Growing up, I only knew him as my grandpa. Just loved to ski, loved to walk in the forest and spend time with his family. From the age of 7, I would fly up to Sacramento all by myself on the plane, having the flight attendants walk me around the airport. And I always remember Nanny B and Papa waiting for me on the other side of the gate, and I just would run out to them. And they'd have a full itinerary ready for me for the weekend. Now that I'm older though, I can grasp more of who Papa was, not just to me, but to everybody. No one spoke more about Tony than my mom. Not including my dad. I don't think anybody else had more of an impact on my mom's life than him. My mom often tells me about her childhood growing up, going to Shasta Lake and all the shenanigans that they had up there, and being the first and last people on the chair slope up the Squaw Valley. When I called my mom crying last month about not being able to conjugate verbs in class, in Spanish class, and feeling like a failure, she always told me how Tony, every time that she called and would cry to him, she would always be there for her troubles. His calm voice that always told her everything was all right. And out of college, my mom always told me that when she had trouble in work and finding a job outside of college and went through 2 jobs and didn't get the exact job that she wanted, Tony was there for her. When she would call feeling hopeless and without a direction, he would remind her to be patient and stay determined. And for my mom's career at Criterion Systems, she would call him to help make decisions on deals and how to navigate the complexities of running a company. He would comfort her when she failed, and he was there for her triumphs. He was my mom's lifeline, and when she didn't know what to do, he was always there. I didn't get to know my Papa as much as I would have wanted to, but through his impact on everybody's life around him, I get to know more about who he is. And through his impact on my mom's life, I get to have his wisdom and feel the comfort he passed on to my mom. When I called my mom crying, I get to hear Papa's wisdom and voice through her. My mom, when I lost my house and my car broke down, I called crying, and I knew I had Papa's wisdom there for me. When I can't find a job out of college and I call my parents feeling hopeless, I know I'll have Papa's wisdom there for me. Papa's ability to know when to comfort, when to be firm, when to love, when to push, and when to be patient has given me something to strive for. This last Christmas I spent with Papa, I realized how similar we were and just how much I had to learn from him. Papa's sudden passing made me reflect on myself. I know that for the rest of my life in college and beyond, when I call my mom, I know I will have Papa's gentle wisdom here for me. Papa set an example of what it meant to be a loving grandpa, father, and friend. Thank you, Papa, for showing me what it means to be an exemplary person.
Now we get to hear from Liz as Liz.
Hello again. This was really an interesting process preparing these notes. I'd like to ask you to take a moment and look down at your hands. Everybody, just take a minute. What do you see? Or who do you see? When I look down at my hands, I see my pop, because we had the exact same hands. We celebrated our first Father's Day together in 1966 in June, and I was barely 3 months old. Some of my earliest memories are seeing him working in the yard, using those hands to mow and edge and weed the front yard to perfection. Nothing gas or electric powered back then. I know my love of yard work came from him, and in recent years we would text often about this, and I'd send photos to him of my work. And he was always so complimentary about my straight lines and clean edges. Fast forward to elementary school, those same hands plucked Tim out of the lagoon, plucked Suzanne out of the pool in Foster City, and helped me match my Garanimal tags for the perfect back-to-school outfit. He taught us how to water ski on the Delta. He drove the boat for hours on end. He taught me how to make my first cocktail when I was in the 5th grade. It was a tequila sunrise. For those of you of a certain age, you'll appreciate that. He taught us how to build a fire. Those hands loaded and unloaded the car and boat more times than I can count. He played endless games of pong and ping pong. There was nothing those hands couldn't do in my mind. And in the 70s, those hands decided to move us to San Jose and start a business in the house. Well before working from home was cool. Originally, some of you might not know this, Pop was actually a drafter and was actually a very good one. And so he had this very unique all-caps penmanship that some of you may have seen. But he had a very loopy and scribbly signature, which I learned to perfect in junior high and high school. When he started the business in the house, I recall Pop wanting to show me how to read an architectural drawing. Those hands spread out that big roll, and he pointed out several things, and I was fascinated. So in the 6th grade, I decided I wanted to be an architect. I started drawing plans of our house and rearranging all the furniture. And then I found out that architecture requires lots of math classes. Of course, I felt that I didn't need plans or math classes to do the job. And I promptly set out rearranging furniture in a few of the neighbors' houses when I was hired to babysit. I babysat twice. So fast forward, the business is cooking along, and we expanded from what was eventually my brother Tim's room into the living room. So there was 2 places in our house that had the office. And I remember thinking, we are going to be rich. Robin Leach is going to be here any minute, because we watch Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous all the time. One afternoon, Pop was out somewhere, and he came home to an unauthorized afternoon balloon fight that was happening in our front yard and in our entryway in our house, right next to where his office was in the living room. And we thought we were totally busted. But those hands jumped right in, started filling water balloons with incredible skill and speed so that we could pummel the neighborhood kids that were attacking us. Once the business moved into its very first office, Pop hired me to do some copying. I was about 12, and he insisted that I apply for a work permit. So I did. When it arrived, off we went to the office for my first day of work, at which I promptly set the copier on fire. Not just a little fire, a full-on fire of the copier. But those hands calmly grabbed the fire extinguisher, put the fire out, and found something else for me to do the rest of the day. And he never made me feel bad about it, but I can't imagine how hard that must have been, him losing that copier he had just leased in his new young business. A few weeks later, after I'd gotten a few paychecks, I thought it was time for me to get a credit card. I was 12. Jason has said it was a sign of things to come. Anyway, Montgomery Ward was my store of choice. So I walked up to the mall, which was not close, got an application and filled it out. I told Pop of my plans and asked him to review my application. Those hands took that application, read it very thoroughly and intently, and he said, "Looks good to me, send it in." And I said, "Well, I need you to sign this because I'm just a kid and they won't give me a card, so I need you to sign it." And he said, "Nope, you're on your own." Now that I had a job and was going to have a credit card, I thought it was time that I let Pop know that I was an adult and that we were equals. So I started to call him Tony. Grandma Freitas was not happy about this. But Pop didn't flinch, so it was fine with him. After getting tired of hearing Grandma's comments, I switched to calling him Papa-san for the longest time. I think I picked that up from Mrs. Livingston on Courtship of Eddie's Father. Around this time, Pop had gone out one evening and came home earlier than planned, and me and Suzanne and Tim had decided that we were going to go out walking around in the neighborhood. And when we came home, Pop was calmly sitting on the porch. He asked us where we had been, and I told him we were visiting the neighbors. Partially true. When he figured out that there was no TP in the house at all, he realized what we had been up to. But he wasn't a yeller, and he didn't use those hands to spank us, although it's been suggested that I could have used a few. He calmly just told us that our allowance would be going toward buying toilet paper for the house, and that tomorrow we would be going to the neighbor's house and cleaning up the mess and apologizing. As you've heard, my dad was quite athletic. He practiced judo, he was a gymnast, he moved into all sorts of racket sports, tennis, racquetball, including the white short shorts. He was famous for his white short shorts. Water skiing, snow skiing. In junior high school, when I was learning to snow ski, let's just say I was not having it. I am not the athletic one at all. After one day we went up to the top of the lift at North Star, I absolutely refused to ski down. But what did Pop do? He calmly, now imagine this, we're at the very top of North Star. He calmly puts me on the back of his skis and with one hand around his back holds on to me, has his two poles in the other hand, and skis us with me sitting on or standing on the back of his skis all the way down the mountain. I thought that was super fun. And when we got to the bottom, I said, "Could we do that again?" And he said, "No chance." But there was a twinkle in his eye. Not long after that, in about 9th grade, I had a party at our house. We were in the midst of taking down some old mirror squares with that gold veining in them. You remember? And the old dark wood paneling. My friends had this idea that we should graffiti on those walls. Pop was in his room giving us all the space that 9th graders need, and when he came out, what did he do? He looked at those walls and he said, "That's really cool." And those hands grabbed some magic markers and joined right in. I recall several times writing "Hi Pop" on those walls, and to my delight, a few days later, every now and then, I would discover a "Hi, Liz" in that all-cap penmanship that I love so much. I wish I had a piece of that wall. He said it took about 5 coats of paint to cover it all about 5 years later. Fast forward to several years ago, Pop and Susan came to visit us in Spokane, and one day we decided to walk about a mile up to the gas station turned fancy deli. We were going to have some beers and some snacks. And the deal was that you had to pick 2 beers, one that you knew and one that you were trying that you didn't know. Pop picked an apricot or guava beer or something like that. But it must have been pretty strong. We had a great visit, and then we were walking home down the road. We realized we lost track of Pop. And we looked back, and about a half a block back, Pop is standing, holding onto a stop sign, saluting every car that came to the stop sign. Smiling, and those hands were waving and saluting. We laughed about that for weeks. Fast forward to Father's Day this year. This was our last Father's Day together. 58 years after that June in 1966. We had a wonderful visit and did all of our favorite things. We went to an antique car show, and those hands pointed out to me cool features and things that he loved seeing in those old cars. He introduced me to his tennis buddies. We played ping pong, and he beat me, actually, fair and square. We played pinball and drank beer and ate ice cream for lunch one day. His favorite flavor is Rocky Road. And that weekend, those hands gave me his favorite book of all time, Shogun. He said he had just finished it for the 3rd time and wouldn't likely read it again, and asked me if I'd like to have his copy. And I'm so glad I have that book that he held in his hands with such joy for so many years. And one of my favorite memories from that weekend was our Father's Day dinner at Tin Lantern just down the road here. I had a chance to tell him how much I appreciated how hard he worked and his entrepreneurial spirit, and how calm he was all those years when it was scary and difficult. I told him how I realized how those qualities in him have made such a positive difference in my life as my dear husband enters his 15th year of being self-employed. And I told my dad that I've never felt worried or afraid that it wouldn't work out. And I know that that came from my pop. And I'm so glad that I was able to tell him that in person. And it was the perfect bookend of Father's Days. His first Father's Day and his last Father's Day. It was with me. And I'm so grateful for that time. On the day my dad died that morning, just moments before he passed, I had sent him a text of a vintage picture of Charles Schultz and the original Snoopy. We both shared a love of Snoopy. And I told him that I was thinking of him. And about 15 minutes later, Suzanne called me and told me what happened. And after I got myself together, I went out to get the mail, and there were 2 cards there from my dad and Susan for our anniversary. Our 22nd wedding anniversary was the next day. That same capitalized print with a sweet note in the first one and another sweet note in the second one. Always signed Pop with a capital P and a little mustache and a happy face in the P. And then he sent me a check for $75 so we could go to dinner. I still have that check, actually. I might not cash it. But what's most amazing of all is when I was sitting in my living room reading those cards, looking out the window, a beautiful bald eagle, my dad's favorite bird, flew slowly and quite low through my front yard and right in front of me. My pop liked sweet things. He liked kind things. He liked Snoopy and Smokey the Bear. He liked songs that told the story, like Bad Bad Leroy Brown and American Pie and The Gambler. He loved to dance, and I know my Aunt Colette will miss holding my dad's hands and dancing to the jitterbug and Rock Around the Clock. He was hip and cool, He wore OP shorts and penguin tank tops. He had a cool blue and white Starsky and Hutch car. And he worked from home 25 years before it was popular. And he was a single dad before it was common. So I see my pop everywhere now. And the bald eagles that fly over my house all the time. And in my yard. And in my husband. But mostly, I see him when I look down at my hands. I love those hands. Thank you so much for letting me share this with you today.
Dick Angus.
Oh, God, I'm going to try to follow that. Oh. You make it tough. We both love Tony. I know you did, of course. And we've talked about a lot of things. Lizzie's my daughter, my surrogate daughter. Because I've had two lovely sons. And I have lovely granddaughters. But Lizzie was first. Because she was Tony's daughter. And I remember her, God, when you were about that high. I met Tony in the early 70s. I think we talked about it, Tony and I, trying to figure out exactly when we met. And I think it was in around 71 in Shell Cove in Foster City. He was there with another couple of friends of his, and they were all at the pool, hanging out, and whatever people do in apartment buildings around pools. And I went down and I introduced myself and became friends with all those guys and gals. And one year, that year I think it was, they invited me to go to the mountains and look into renting a cabin to go skiing. of all things. So Tony and I actually started off skiing together as part of a group of people that I've long forgotten. But the next year, we all seemed to have boats. We're buying boats and we're going different places water skiing. Just before we went out to the Delta a lot. And Tony, I don't know, he knew of a lake down in San Jose area somewhere. We all went out to that. I didn't remember him that well in those days. But afterwards, we actually started this thing. I don't know how it all ended up, but we ended up, Tony was living in the apartments, and I don't know why. I don't remember meeting the kids, but I knew he was a single dad, and he had kids. All of a sudden, he disappears. He has to buy a house in San Jose. He was living in Foster City to start with. Then he went to Belmont Shores, and then someplace else. But he ended up in San Jose. And I guess while he was in San Jose, he met a whole bunch of other people, typical of Tony. He just met people, immediately became friends with them, and they seemed to follow him. I don't know. Anyway, I'm rambling now, but because I didn't write a speech as such. But at that time, Tony talked to a bunch of other people, a couple of guys that worked at GE down in San Jose. And I don't know how he became friends with them. But Jerry Smith, and he met Jerry Smith, he met the Acronex, I don't know, who's the other guy? I can't remember. Anyways, we all decided to go to Shasta. I didn't go the first year, but for the second year, we all went to Shasta. That was early 70s. And that's when I met all the family. The two girls and the son. And Timmy used to call me Mr. Angus. He was scared of me. Because when he was behind my boat and he wasn't paying attention, I'd yell at him. Tony wouldn't. Tony was a much more passionate, caring, understanding. I didn't. I had no bit. I had two sons, and I knew how to handle them. So he always called me Mr. Angus. And then I think he did that the last couple of days. He called me recently. But Susie and Liz were my favorite alternate family. I remember my sons weren't around. We all grew up together. We did. I don't know how old Tony and I were, but Tony was 6 years younger than me. Anyways, those were fun days. I could talk forever about the skiing and the water skiing and the fun things we did. Tony and I fished together a lot too back in those days. But somewhere along the line, I decided I had a group of water skiers and I had a group of snow skiers that I hung around with, and they didn't know each other, except I knew them. And so one year I decided I was going to invite Tony to go skiing with me, because he was a South Shore guy, I was a Squaw Valley, North Shore guy. And so Tony came up to the cabin, the rented cabin, and gosh darn it, he didn't meet one of the fine ladies that I considered my dear friend Susan. And so anyways, I had the pleasure of introducing the two of them. And they fell madly in love. Of course, I thought they would never, ever last. And Susan reminds me all the time of that. But they did last, and they're a lovely couple. I'm very fortunate to have been their friend for all these years. And we've done lots together. I knew Tony when he first started his business. I invested in his business, not an awful lot, but I was the last guy to sell out. And anyways, I'm going to miss him. One of the things I did want to say is, in the last couple of years now, the last 5 years, 4 years, Tony and I got to know each other better. Because all these years that we've been together, we weren't. We were with groups. We were the family, we were some other group, or ski group, or water ski group, or whatever. So we were friends, but we didn't know each other personally, as like brother and brother, you know. So we decided somewhere along the line, last couple of years, that we were going to meet once a month, and just the two of us, and go out and have coffee at a Starbucks or whatever, and talk. And that's what we've done. And those last few years have been the most precious thing to both of us, I think. For me, it was. I learned to love the guy, and not just to be a friend and play together. We talked about a lot of things, and I tell them of all my adventures when we weren't together. I traveled with my Susan, and places we've been. He talked about things he did, and we just, 3 hours went by just like that. And we'd be with our calendar saying, okay, next month, when are we going to meet up again? And unfortunately, Tony passed on the 13th, and I think on the 23rd or something like that, we were supposed to meet up again. So we didn't get to talk about what we left on the table the month before. But those are precious times, and I got to know my friend, and I consider my friend my best friend. And we've talked about end of life, and we've always said that what I want is I want to just be doing something I really like, or I really enjoy, and just drop dead. And that's because I've had heart problems and all, heart disease and all, and I expected that to happen anytime. But I didn't expect Tony to be the first one. I wanted to be the first one. So he beat me to it. I think he's paving the way, I hope. And so I hope to meet up with him again. I just didn't put it on the calendar. I love him.
Now's the time when, if anybody else would like to share something, you can do it with a loud voice from where you are, or come up and use the microphone. I don't think the microphone can reach you. In fact, if people want to queue, that might be good.
My name's Toby Kovic, and I am a neighbor in the Freitas neighborhood. Of course, after listening to everybody, you're all neighbors and friends, and it's just a little larger neighborhood out there. I'm just lucky enough to live a little closer than most of you. And also, I have a wood splitter that I split with Tony. We went together and bought a wood splitter a couple of winters ago. It's kind of an interesting time in our neighborhood because Christmas night, we'd gotten a wood splitter before, and Tony was helping me put it together. And that Christmas night, we got a storm from the north, and we got an incredible amount of snow at our elevation, and so much snow that there was reported to be a ton to a ton and a half of snow on each of the trees in our area at this elevation. And they call it Snowmageddon, and it was almost like it was a hurricane came through. There was, at 4 in the morning, trees started snapping and falling, and you could hear them thundering from a mile away. And at about 6 in the morning, Susan and Tony came down the driveway above us, and I had to shoo them back up to their house because trees were still snapping off and falling, and I was worried that somebody was going to get hit. We were fortunate enough at that time that nobody's house or cars, no damage was done to anything in our neighborhood physically, except for the power lines took quite a beating. And the roadway was a catastrophe. And before that, our neighborhood is a microcosm of the rest of the world right now, and we have various religions and various political beliefs and other things, and we didn't always get along real well, but everybody pretty much put up with each other. Well, after that, everybody got on their snow boots and their gloves, and those of us with chainsaws and gas got out there, and we began to limb those trees and cut them up into movable pieces, and we cleared everyone's driveway, and we cleared the road. And then another neighbor came by with a small tractor, and we were able to get the snow off the road. And while many people in the community were without power for 2 weeks, PG&E was able to get into our neighborhood because of that and restore our power within about 4 days. And one of the neighbors, who was always not too sure about some of the rest of us, soon after that remarked, "You know, these neighbors are actually pretty good people." Interesting. So we have a homeowners association in our neighborhood. It's fairly new. It's actually 37 years old, but it was all developed at the same time. There's nine properties there with homes on them, and as a part of that, there's a fire protection system. And the developer of that was Mike Flutie. He was a supervisor here in town, and he doesn't live in the neighborhood anymore. But as part of developing that and maintaining a fire protection system in the road, we had to have a homeowners association, and along with that, of course, comes governance And so we got together, once 3 homes were built and people were in them, we got together and started a homeowners association. Mike Flutie at the time was the president. We needed a secretary, a treasurer, and a vice president. Tony offered to be the secretary and the treasurer, thankfully for all the rest of us, because he had that business expertise, and I became the vice president. Shortly after that, others moved into the neighborhood, and Mike Flutie moved out of the neighborhood, and I ended up becoming the president. And because there's only 9 homes there, when you come to the end of the year and you have your meeting and you want to re-elect some officers, there's not a whole lot of people volunteering to be the officer. So I've been the president ever since, and Tony, of course, for 37 years was the secretary, and we were able to move the treasury off to one of the other neighbors at one point. So we're going to have a hell of a time finding a new secretary. I don't know when that's going to happen. Tony and Susan are skiers, and throughout the evolution of the neighborhood, we became closer, and I realized that they skied, and we started talking about skiing at Squaw Valley and various places we skied. And I was a ski coach for years at the local high school, and I'm pretty good at tuning and waxing skis. And so we started a little thing in my man cave. I have a table, and I have ski vices and a hot wax setup, and so I began waxing and skis, and we started what's called a wine and wax. And so once a week, or almost every time we go skiing, in prep of the next day, because your skis do maneuver a lot better on the snow once they've been tuned and waxed, we would do a wine and wax, and we'd all bring some food to share and get together in our basement. And of course, Tony, he would drink wine, but that really wasn't his thing. Tony liked to have a beer, and I had a little refrigerator with beer in it, and he goes, you know, if you had a beer, I think I'd rather have a beer. So real quick, I'd like to raise a toast. Tony, have a beer. Tony had a little saying, and I'm not going to stay up here too much longer, but he would call up, or we would meet on the driveway as he's walking by with Susan and his dog, and he would always stop and he'd say, well, I gotta tell you. And that's when I knew I was in for a little one of the last times that he called me on the phone, we have a old truck. We have my wife's father's old pickup truck, and we use that to move wood and haul brush and stuff, and Tony and Susan borrowed it quite often. And he had called me and he said, you know, I've been working back over here and I've got quite a bit of brush, and I was thinking about taking it to the dump. And he and Susan aren't real fond of having a burn pile. They're a bit worried about burning. Whereas my wife and I, we have a burn pile about half the size of this plateau. We're about 30 feet high, and Susan's always threatening to call the police. So I told him, I said, no, I said, why don't you just wait on that? Let's not waste that money to go to the dump. We'll just bring that burn pile down and add it onto my burn pile, and we can use your money to buy a bottle of Fireball. And neighborhood-wise, I'm not going to tell this story because it's too sad. Anyways, Tim over there, talking about the last time you got to talk to him, I talked to him about 15 minutes before he passed. We had a dog pass away in the canal, and I called him to let him know because Susan walks her down on the canal all the time. They do. And I hung up with him, and I was consoling the neighbor who lost his dog, and Susan called me, and I did not pick the phone up because I figured it was about the dog that drowned. And when I finished consoling the neighbor, about 5 minutes later, I took a look at my phone, and there was an urgent message from Susan. Please get home, Tony's down. Nick passed me up on the road as I was getting back up that way, and Nick and I did find him 15 minutes later in the backyard. And Nick did a great job starting and doing CPR, and I was able to help. And I miss that gentleman very much, but he went fast. And I think, as other people have said, if I get a chance, I'd like to go the same way. And so, okay, enough of that. Susan and Tony, we ski together a lot, and Susan calls me her coach. And, you know, Susan skis like Michaela Schifrin, so it doesn't take much coaching to set her in line. But we sure have a good time together, and we'll be enjoying that in the future.
Well, I'm not going to be as sad as the other stories that I've heard. I'm here representing my husband, Tom Hawker. That wasn't scripted. Who couldn't be here because he's somewhere across the Pacific Ocean returning from Japan. But this is what he's up for. Cody. Yeah. Warm greetings and goes to Susan and all Anthem's family from me, Tom Harper. My wife, Carrie, is filling in for me at this moment. I'm in the air flying to San Francisco. And able to join with you in remembering my dear friend, Anthony Freitas. First off, you'll hear me referring to him as Anthony, not Tony, as most of you know him. We first met in 7th grade at Hoover Junior High in San Jose, and at that time, he was known as Anthony. And for me, over 65 plus years, he has always been Anthony. He and the usual group of buddies who lived in the same area of San Jose were together at Hoover and then Abraham Lincoln High School. Heather, where are you? Okay, there we go. Several of our group have preceded Anthony in passing. Life was different back then. We weren't tied to phones and computers, so we got together evenings and weekends to ride bikes, play games, and in the spring, build forts in the empty fields where we threw grass clods at each other. Imagine trying to do that today. We stayed out on summer evenings playing and only stopped when it started getting dark and we knew parents would be expecting us back by then. Anthony was a natural leader and usually the guy who came up with what we would be doing. As he moved on to high school, girls entered the picture and activities started moving towards skating. Anthony, being a good-looking guy and active in sports, no surprise, especially tennis, was popular. Over the years, we double dated and for a while even dated twins. One of the fun ways... One of the fun ways we occupied our weekends was riding around town looking for girls in the VW one of our best friends owned. After high school, we had infrequent contact for many years as we went to college, married, and started families. When I moved back to San Jose and started working at a local bank, Anthony and I reconnected and kept in contact from then on. Wait a minute. Technical difficulties here. Okay. After high school, we had infrequent contact, as I had said, and started working at a local bank. Anthony and I had reconnected and kept in contact from then on. Anthony had started Criterion and gave me an opportunity to be his banker as the business grew. One day he called me and said we should get together for lunch. So we set up a time. Over the course of the meal, he finally got around to what was on his mind. Knowing that I had remarried, he asked me a bunch of questions about what that was like. I finally said, "What's this all about?" He then said he was getting really serious with a great lady and was thinking about asking her to marry him. That became my introduction to Susan. Over succeeding years, they and several other couples started the tradition of going to San Jose State football games and having super tailgate parties. That did, of course, break up when Susan and he moved to Applegate. However, our little group still has one of these activities was skiing although Anthony and Susan were pretty much in a class of their own. Thinking of skiing, one of my favorite memories of skiing was the day when the two of them took me under their wings and decided to show me Squaw Valley. Yes, I know the name has changed, but it's always been Squaw for me. From the perspective of expert locals, they had me skiing so far over my head and loving every scary minute of it. It was hands down the greatest day skiing I ever had. I should have put up on the skis again. I'll never forget that day. To wrap this up, Anthony has been one of my closest, dearest, and longest friends over my life. He always had a quick smile, a positive and friendly word, and was game for most anything. He has been a man of great faith and lived a life that evidenced this in his daily life. I have been blessed to call him a friend and will miss him greatly. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jan Heyman, and of all you people here, I have probably known Anthony the longest. I have known him since 1961, right out of high school. And so therefore I've known Liz and Tim and Sue, and watched them all grow up. I even wallpapered the baby's room for Nick. And when Suzanne was talking this morning, I realized that I too learned to ski, water ski behind the boat. Sherry took most of my speech, so I won't repeat it, but Tom and my husband Paul and Anthony were friends from the 7th grade on, and we will certainly miss him.
I'm Renee Heyman. Oh. Back in 2019, my father passed away, and Anthony and my dad Paul were total doppelgangers. Down to, I don't know, these doppelgangers. I believe it was in 21, my girlfriends and I were driving back from Tahoe, and we stopped in Auburn, and forgive me if I can't say the name of the burger joint, Idakas, sorry. We stopped in there, my girlfriend Denise and I, and we ordered hamburgers and stuff, and she was waiting for the order, and I was gonna go find a table. And I was just sitting there, and I look up, Anthony, is that you? He's sitting there with a baseball cap on, reading a book. I'm like, get over here, have lunch with us. So we proceeded to probably spend 40 minutes sitting there talking and eating our burgers. And he's like, whatever you do, don't tell Susan. So I'm telling you now. Sorry. But going to Liz's things about your dad's hands, I had a hard time looking at his hands because they reminded me of my father's hands. And when it was time to go, I didn't want to go because I wanted to hang on to Anthony because it was my way of staying connected to my father being here on this earth. And when my mom called and told me that Anthony suddenly passed away, it touched me to my core, not knowing. It was like it was okay for my dad to be up in heaven because I still had Anthony here. But now that he's gone, I don't have a connection to my father other than prayer and just talking to him in space and time and nature. And I miss both of them to death. No pun intended. I envisioned my father being at the pearly gates with a little scotch in the rocks for Anthony, saying, "Here you go." And they're just up there having a good old time watching all of us down here, celebrating them. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle Hamill. I'm congregant at the church here. And I'm to Metavista in 2011 to take care of my mother. I had 2 dogs and I walked a lot. And I had the great fortune to run into 2 people walking dogs, Susan and Tony. And part of the reason that I'm here, the other part is because of the Browns, who I also ran into and told me about this church. Community is really important, as Nick said. And what's interesting is when you come to a funeral like this and people tell you about their relationship with the person, you see a whole nother part of the person that you had some idea of, but you see it in more broad implications. And you realize just how little you knew someone. And I think that's true of my relationship with Tony. I worked with him on the church council for 6 years. We socialized, drank some really good wine, walked our dogs. I'm not a downhill skier, I'm a cross-country skier, and I couldn't actually get him to cross over, but Tony really was, as everyone has said, a wonderful person, and that is my experience too. He was really good at summarizing what was important as the treasurer here for the rest of the council to understand. And he said it simply. And he was full of life, and he was welcoming to everyone. And I'm really, really grateful for that coincidence that day, 2011. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. You've heard of Tony being We've heard of Tony being the community man, the great father. What I want to tell you is what a great boss. I've known Tony for over 30 years. And as a boss, he treated us all like family. We had major projects. We could have had tense moments discussing projects, but he was always calm. It was all about what we wanted, the employee. Even when I left Criterion for 2 years and I told him I was leaving, it was complimentary. Sure, Janice, I'll say a good word for you. He didn't want me to feel bad. He knew I already felt bad having to come and tell him that. So he wanted to make me feel okay about my decision. But Tony treated me like family. My husband, Stephen, was part of the family. Susan was part of the family. When I would come up to Applegate for meetings, and I was here by myself overnight, Tony would make sure that he and Susan would take me out to dinner so that I didn't feel alone. I felt like I was here with family who would not let me spend an evening having dinner alone. So the Tony that I remember is the family man. It's Susan and Tony. It's Tony and his family. He would tell me about Nick at school, and he would ask me about Stacy and Malcolm. But as a boss, he was the best. Whatever I needed, because my family needs come first, he would always say, of course. Never did he say no, and always he had a good word.
And of course, I moved away from the company for 2 years. And during those 2 years, it's like, Janice, you left too soon. The dam has broken, you need to come back. And I did, because it was like coming back home. So I wanted to make sure that you had that side of him, how he treated us. Anyone else from equipment planning, from Criterion, feel free to say more. But to me, I knew the man, I knew the family, he was a family man. And I appreciate him so much. I had to be there with everyone to say our goodbyes. Yes, sir.
We're bringing up all the medical equipment planners that was part of the company. 3 have already left today, but we wanted you to take a good look at the representation of us. Yeah. I met Tony in the around 1985, long 86. Probably before a lot of you was even born. And we've had a very long relationship. Not only did he work with Kaiser Permanente, that's where I met him, but also his daughter came on board and invited us to join her to create the Southern California region. And I worked for Suzanne for over 10 years, a wonderful experience, and had such a great time. And I know that her expertise and knowledge of the family and bringing us all together was just wonderful. And me and Janice, I met Janice at Kaiser. Then in turn, we met Tony, and Tony did work for Kaiser. And each one of us have had that many years with Criterion. And like I said, my career with the Freitas family has been since 86. Come out.
So I'm one of those hybrids. My name is Tom Angus, and you heard what I call my dad. My dad died when I was 48. I felt pretty lost, and I decided that it was best to move out west. And not only did he take me in, begrudgingly, thinking, what am I going to do with this in my house? I was very sad. I lived down at Carmel for a while at first, and he would invite me up to these people's house for Thanksgiving. And I had no idea who these people were, and I walked in, and I got to tell you, it's a strange family. It's really wild, and it's really crazy. I remember the youngest guy that's standing over the glasses, which, by the way, Nick, I got to say this, amazing what you said about your dad. That was absolutely amazing. You captured him. We would come, and Suzanne, you'll remember this stuff. There'd always be the place settings, and then you'd have to move, and how much we all enjoyed that so much. And then you started doing that at different events with Criterion. Was like, oh my God, she didn't like that. Now look what she's doing. It was crazy.
Hey, you weren't supposed to tell that.
I know. Well, you know me. I have a broken mind. I say everything, but it's the truth. Mostly what I wanted to say is I've met all these people through Tony. And an entire family that took me in when I didn't have a family on the West Coast besides my uncle. Tony was a confidant of mine for making decisions, sometimes bad decisions that he'd let me make. And the power that he put in you when he was confident in you, when you weren't ever confident in yourself. The project with Laguna Honda that Sarah and I worked together with greatly. When it got time to bring this, the largest, at the time, I don't know if it still is, it was the largest hospital build for 794 beds for assisted living that ever happened in the United States. People were coming from all over the world to see this place because it was beautiful. And I remember walking through it one day with Tony, getting ready for the logistics of getting everything in this gigantic building. And we're walking through a hallway, and he says, so I'm going home now because Susan and I got something going on. But you're gonna just, from now on, just do this. And I said, well, what do you mean I'm gonna do this? He says, you're gonna do this. He says, you got this. He says, you're fine. I was literally almost wetting my pants in fear, but he would have confidence in people before they even knew what they could do. And if you made mistakes, he might look at you weird and say, well, what were you thinking? But he'd work your way through it. He was an amazing man. And I look at the colleagues that I have around here, and I don't want to be too winded, I apologize. What I do want to say is I keep on hearing about community. The people that are standing up here that are all beautiful and looking young, Tony's reach created in almost every hospital in this state, never mind other states, huge impacts. And he created professionals that have created amazing impacts. And it was never about building the building or getting the equipment in. It was how that was going to serve the community was number one, and our people and families. So I'm sorry that he's gone. I'm glad that he's there to find all the best fishing holes. And I will never play pickleball with him because I just can't compete. But I know that he's going to be there to greet my dad when he gets here. And I know that they'll find everything that I need to know when I get there myself. So I love this family, and these people are my family behind me, besides my own. Thanks very much, Susan, for sharing him with us. This is Lisa Curl. One other thing we have to say, because I got to make it light for her, because she won't get through it. There's a thing about Tony you might not have known. When you had his office door closed in Applegate, you could knock on it. You might be there for 5 minutes before the door might open, or you felt like it was safe to open. And if there was a small bag of Fritos on the desk, you knew you were okay, because he could actually talk to you. But if you ever opened the door and the large bag was there, it was better just to back out and leave the door open.
But don't tell Susan. So I'm Lisa Curl, and I will try to get through this. When I started at Criterion 24 years ago, it was Tony, Tracy Lynn, and myself. So when I say I have spent an inordinate amount of time with Tony Freitas in his car, 8 years, every day. Every day I have talked about religion, politics. I know all about you guys. Oh man, all the stories. I've known Nick since he was little, and he was more than my boss. He was my mentor. He taught me about equipment planning, but more so he taught me how to be a human being, a better human being. All of us here are better because Tony was in our life. And I won't be able to get through all the things I want to say, so I'm going to say something. And when Tony and Susan were at my son Forrest's bar mitzvah, he gave a speech, and he said, and I want to thank my mom's boss, Tony Freitas, for all the time that he gave her all to schlep me back and forth, because the synagogue is in Sacramento, and Applegate is down the street. And he said, you know, thank you so much for all that time, and I want to let you know you can have her back now. So I'd like to say to God, thank you for giving us Tony Freitas, and you can have her back now.
Seriously, people, these planners. Oh my God, we're all the same. Oh my God. My name's Kelly, and I was telling this story to my people this morning before we came here, and I had been a teacher for 24 years, and I had decided that I get these ideas. I just want to do something different. I want to learn to do something different. I want to meet new people. And so I answered this ad in the Auburn Journal when that's what we still did.
And there was a job, an advertisement for a part-time filing position, and I mean filing hard copies into a filing cabinet. And so I thought, oh, that sounds like a fun no-brainer. So anyway, I applied for this job, and I thought, oh, this would just be something fun to do until I find what I want to do for my next chapter, right? And I worked part-time filing and trying to discern Tony's handwriting, because as you say, his printing was one thing, but his handwriting was almost impossible. But anyway, after about 3 months, he came to me and he said, are you bored? Aren't you bored filing? And I said, yes, I am terribly bored filing. And he said, would you like to learn something about equipment planning? And I said, I would like to learn something about equipment planning. And that began my second career I didn't know that I wanted. And I you know, when I have been thinking so much about Tony, but honestly, even before he passed, I have always been so grateful for Tony for hiring me, first of all, to do just some mundane, you know, it's just, but for hiring me and then for recognizing that maybe I wanted to do something different, and maybe I would like a new challenge, and for the patience that he showed me, and for the knowledge he imparted in me, and the wisdom he shared with me, and the trust that he put in me when he should not have trusted me to go to meetings, or he should not have, but he did. And you know, it worked out in the end, but he had faith in me and he trusted me, and I'm very grateful for that. But something that Tom just said, and I said this to my people earlier today, I'm also really grateful because Tony gave me people. Gave me all these people that I would not have had in my life, and I'm so grateful. Anyway.
Hi, my name is Mark. I go to church here, and about a week and a half ago, I got a call from Suzanne, Tony's daughter, asking about pictures of Tony. Tony was in our men's group here at church, and he had an amazing time with Tony as treasurer, secretary, all that stuff. And I wanted to thank, where is she? Where's Mrs. Freitas? Is she? Anyways, I wanted to thank you for letting Tony come and play with the men once a month at the men's group. Yeah, so we really enjoyed Tony, and what the grandson said was amazing, because I think if we can model ourselves after anybody, Tony is the guy to do it. So I just wanted the family to know that we really had an awesome time with Tony and the men's group, and yeah, we'll miss him. Thank you.
On behalf of the family, thank you for being here. What a wonderful honor for a wonderful man. One of the things that I take away from today is let me say, I was not surprised by anything today. I didn't learn much about Tony because his goodness was so manifest. In all the years I had the pleasure and delight and honor to know him and call him a friend. The one takeaway I have to say about Tony is looking at all those pictures. What's with all the hats? I think 60% of the pictures of Tony, he had headgear on. Thank you again on behalf of the family. I know the family wants to also acknowledge all the community support that went into making today possible. Thank you to all of you. And again, thank you to Joel for coming for such a long way to honor Tony. May we remember Tony at his best in every way we can. Thank you.
Yes.
Are we allowed to hang out and eat and drink?
Mm-hmm.
When do we have to leave by? When the streetlights turn on, we all have to go home. I'm going to eat and drink now.
I have a. Oh, I'm not anymore. I'm gonna try and look at the memory table. Oh. Well, sort of. Bear with me, folks, on line looking at it. Let's see if I can look at. Just take it off, but I.
No.